I'm going to invite Ali Grehan as a responder to ignite our conversation. We've seen Ali already, but just to say, Ali's the Dublin City architect and leads a multidisciplinary team responsible for developing a broad urban design and regeneration agenda, including the delivery of a diverse architectural work programme. She devised and coordinated Dublin's bid for the World Design Capital 2014, which is now continuing as Pivot Dublin, and is currently undertaking an MSc in climate change and policy, media and society at DCU.
In terms of when I was reflecting back on our own efforts to do this really tiny pilot project, Dublin House, and which failed, which has not succeeded. We have failed to deliver something like that. So that's I'll fess up to that. And I don't like talking continually about. I don't like talking about Dublin House because it did fail and it disappointed, and people were disappointed because there was huge interest in it. But everything you said this morning, I kind of thought, yes, that's why we failed. That's why we failed. Just to say, because Porrick had actually asked me specifically to raise this Dublin House idea. Just to say, Jacqueline, it was very much based in 2009 on this Amsterdam, this Dutch idea about plot development. And so we weren't really thinking, oh, this is a co-housing pilot. In fact, to be honest, I'd never heard the term co-housing. It wasn't about that. It was actually based on the plot development idea. Similarly to you and to Michael's point, it was a response to the economic crash. So we were trying to be, I suppose, multifaceted in how we approached it, in that it was to deal with an economic reality, which was the big developers had gone. So maybe we could bring the small developers into the frame. We were looking at this idea of apartment development specifically. We weren't looking, because it was going to be in Dublin city centre, we weren't looking at standalone houses, because that wouldn't have been appropriate, but we were looking at apartments, which was setting the bar a bit high, because we were expecting people to come together as a group. And we were also interested in this architectural, if we offered people an opportunity to design their own apartments, would that actually restore a damaged reputation that we had found ourselves with in Ireland, which was about apartment living. We're still, getting to grips with apartment living. So we thought it could kind of tick all these boxes, and it was all going to happen, and everybody was vastly enthusiastic. But of course, we didn't provide the support. We said we knew that it had to be a publicly owned site, because it would be that might be enough. But we didn't provide the network of the support network and push it actively. We did lots of things. We went into a lot of efforts to facilitate. I mean, the thing started off as an ideas competition in 2009, ended up finally with the site development opportunity being launched just for one plot in 2014 with the very developed things, and then it failed in 2015. Our group withdrew because they couldn't get the banks behind them. They couldn't deal with all sorts of issues. So I suppose that's really my response. It's we've learned a lot, and other people have managed to. I know Cloughjordan has in Tipperary has actually dealt with incredible issues and prevailed, which is fantastic. But I've only really one question to you, Temitope. Why is the Mayor of London doing this?
So I think there has been a lot of talk in terms of diversifying the home building sector. So as I briefly touched upon, it's really dominated by private developers. So it's really important to bring in other players into the home building field, and community engagement is a great way to do this, to get communities to actually come together and have the opportunity to develop and build homes themselves, and homes that they can build and they can live in too. And I think another reason of why he's doing it is because communities have come together and told them that this is what they want as well. So they've done a really good job in holding the mayor to account and saying, you know, it's really important that homes are affordable in the long term, and community land trusts are a great way of doing that. So they ensure that the homes are affordable in perpetuity. And affordable housing is a key thing for the Mayor of London. So in terms of having another model to deliver it, he's very supportive of that.
There's a question in from the audience in London. Ali, you can join us here if you wish. We'll get into a conversation. For only 20 minutes, but let's see what happens. Temitope, in London, what is affordable housing? How are you defining affordable?
So that's a very good question. Affordable housing is... So there's been lots of talk in what does it actually mean. So when the Mayor of London came in, he said that he wants to define this in a way, well, hopefully that is clearer. I'm not sure if he's achieved that. So there is social rents, which is essentially the rents that councils charge in terms of homes that they build and residents living. And then there's also something called London Living Rent and London Affordable Rent, which the terminology is quite, I think, there's a lot of jargon, but essentially this means that in terms of geographically, homes are reflective of the income of that geographical area. So in terms of homes being affordable, they are affordable to the local income of that area.
Michael, there's a similar question for you in Berlin. How much is a two-bedroom apartment in Spearfield compared to similar apartment in a private non-co-op sector in Berlin? Just to give us a comparison.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're set up with the model of a housing cooperative, and an important point to start off with is that a cooperative becomes more affordable with time. So the construction cost, the cost of the land, of course, are quite similar, right, with people in the neighborhood. But after 5 years of being there, let's say we had costs of 2,200 euros a square meter for a private space in the cooperative. If you look in the neighborhood, you're going to anywhere from 3,000 up to 7,000 now. So we're already way under market. So we were able to build affordably, meaning we didn't build any luxury housing, but as the years go by, it becomes more affordable. That's really the most important thing, you know, the long-term perspective.
There's a question for you, Jacqueline, around the planning process for the project you presented. What were the steps in that? It's a big question. I don't know if you can condense and answer the planning process. Do people apply for planning permission? Is it come with outline planning permission for the type of building that's expected on it?
Yeah. Well, I showed you this plot passport, which is, let's say, a summary of, and that's it. It's a concise summary on which you're being tested when you ask for your building permission. So in that sense, let's say the urban context is guaranteed. And then we have a national law, a building decree, which is testing you about everything, whether your sanitation is right, your roof is not leaking, etc. And that has nothing to do with self-building or whatever. And that's it. So one of the persons who built over there, he said, okay, I buy the plot. I sign a private land contract with the city. I see the plot passport. Then I put forward my permission. And it's being granted at some time. And this, I start building. That's it. And that's it. But still some work to do for the person. But then the city is really not actively involved unless something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm. Good. One of the things I'm reflecting on is we were talking a lot about participation, co-production, commoning, coming together. We have a rich tradition in Ireland of cooperatives in our history. Horace Plunkett went around the country encouraging communities to collectivise and come together. We seem to have lost the competency to cooperate, to participate, to come together, to reach agreements. I think it's one of the struggles of a lot of co-housing group is continuing cohesion, and mitigating conflict. For all three of you, is there any way that you enable or facilitate the coming together, the participation? Any suggestions or any insights for us here in Ireland?
You know, I worked in Almere, which is interesting to me because this is a pioneer kind of city, new area, new sound. So there is no culture yet. It's not a village where people know each other, or like Amsterdam, where people know each other. And this is an interesting challenge because you can't tell people to become friends, and as a city. And we thought there would be a great demand for co-housing collectives. But we found out in the beginning, already quite soon, that it was very thin. So we respected that. I think you should also respect if it's not like that. A family is in itself also a co-housing group, and multi-generations families are growing quite quickly as long as they have the possibility of making a home which fits with that. So it's more, I think, if this is the context which I had, it might be different in Dublin, then I think you have to think about the urban plan. Like, for example, I showed you these little houses. Individuals get in, but you have already something which makes them something together. Or I showed you the street with the houses which were 80 square meters plots. They had little gardens. Then the plot was less expensive, but we made a public space in the front. So the kids are playing there together. So they step in individually, but it has to do with how you make an urban plan.
So zooming back to the start of the process, Temitope, any suggestions from London of how you bring some cohesion to a group, get a group going, playing around with design?
So I think in terms of getting groups together, it's essentially what is the purpose that you're trying to achieve. Of course, it is living in a home that you feel will meet all your needs. So we found that some groups have come together based on certain characteristics, whether it's older generation, younger generation. It really does, like, I think community coming together comes in many different forms, and I think that is the beauty of it, that there is different ways that you can kind of galvanize the community to come together. I mean, it is great that groups of friends can come together, but I think essentially that's not the purpose of the funding that we're giving. It is to ensure that homes are available to people that really do need it. So, yeah, I think.
Brilliant. Michael, you framed your start of your presentation in commoning, which I really liked, resonates a lot with me. That art of coming together as a group of people, of developing a shared asset or shared knowledge. There must be some ideas you have that you can share around how we ignite that process, how we get that process started.
Yeah, commenting on what's just been said, I'd like to talk about housing cultures or co-housing cultures. And housing can be something quite complex and varied, and it can be something quite simple. And I think it's true in most of our cities that housing has been simplified, meaning that most all people, including architects, don't have an understanding of the complexity or the possibilities. So if you say, let's do co-housing, let's see who's interested in collective or cooperative housing, very few people. They don't have the experience. So you have to reach out to people. You have to involve them. You have to engage them. You have to inform and educate them. My point there is, it's not that people don't know how to share and don't know how to live in a community way, but they might not have the experience. So you can't start from today with no experience and then ask them to move into a cooperative tomorrow. So in a place like Dublin, not much different from Berlin or other places, a lot of education, I mean, this is part of the conference here, right? It's a discussion that's going on, which takes not just days, but years. So realizing that. And then secondly, the point about these projects actually happening or being good or successful, use the word facilitate, and I would really emphasize that we need good facilitators, we need good moderators. So quite often these are not even the architects, sometimes they are, but we need people that know how to bring people together that help people to make group decisions. So the process of facilitating and moderating is something, it's a whole field in itself, which needs a lot of development and training. So I would really give some attention to that.
Great. Ali, do you want to share any insights from your perspective?
Well, yes, I mean, the overwhelming, I think, principle that I suppose we identified at the beginning, but we didn't quite get there. But I have to say, I see Dermot Lacey, Councillor Lacey is here, and Dermot is a huge supporter of the Dublin House project, and just want to acknowledge that. The fact is there's this element of permission, and when you say, look at what is happening in other cities, it's just all terribly matter of fact. I mean, this is something we do here. You know, this is part of the picture. It's something we do, and we're going to put together whatever systems, because we put support systems in place for pretty much everything we do, and yet co-housing is supposed to just sort itself out. Well, actually, there's huge resources go into supporting every single strand of housing delivery. So it needs support, it needs permission, and what we were so impressed with from Amsterdam was when, I think I was there, I was speaking to somebody called Sabine Lebec, who was saying, well, I mean, 10% of our housing programme is going to be through this plot development model. Well, that's great. 5,000 homes targeted for next year, 500 are going to be, we're going to do it this way. But I also know that Amsterdam had its own problems, so it just dealt with them. You know, and I suppose my question to the panel is, how do you protect the integrity of the system, the co-housing ideal, to make sure it doesn't end up succumbing to exploitation by speculative development? Because you've all said that speculative development is the opposite of
Let's hear some responses on that. That's a really interesting question, Ali. How do we protect that?
Yeah. Maybe two things. The thing I learned doing this job is we are the public authorities, and they are the persons who are going to invest. And you must keep your barrier. Their problem cannot be immediately your problem because you get stuck. So I had a really good legal person. She said to me, it's not a playground. We treat individuals in the same way as developers. And it's a very easy sentence to be said, but it's a very important sentence because it works, then it really works. And it's a lot of pragmatic work, in fact. And then what we have in our land contracts, for speculation, the question, during the crisis there was no speculation, so we didn't introduce anything. And nowadays there is, so it means that individuals who buy plots, they have to stay there for at least 3 years, and then they are able to sell their property if they want to. But if it comes to, this is Amsterdam, if it comes to Amsterdam, there's much more pressure on speculation. It means that they have their lease contracts, and in lease contracts you can put, in fact, theoretically, everything you want to prevent speculation.
Michael, from your perspective, to protect a co-housing development from just selling on and becoming part of the global casino, any suggestions of how to protect that asset?
Yeah, thanks. It's really getting at some of the most important questions of our, well, not just housing, but urban development in times like these, right? Heated up development, speculation, and growth. And I'm appreciative, again, for the information that's put out by SOA here, emphasizing land ownership and development. And I think a lot of people coming into co-housing discussions expect immediately to be jumping into questions about, well, what do the spaces look like? What are the, what's the community kitchen look like? And what about a community garden or a rooftop terrace? But the fundamental questions that really need attention today are the ownership of the land and the ways to avoid speculation. So I repeat myself a bit, but we need to give a lot of attention to these institutions and to the ownership structures. So, the things that we have out there, the instruments, well, cooperative housing, community land trusts, non-speculative approaches, perhaps working with city-owned housing companies, but starting off with those foundations So again, if we're thinking about the long term, we have to get that right. Otherwise, as I would say, we're just playing around. And it's quite likely that 10 years later, the stuff will be gone, or at least not affordable.
Thank you. Timothy, the community-led housing in London you're talking about, is there any mechanisms in there to ensure that it's held by the community and not just sold off and speculated with?
Yeah, definitely. I think this also has to do in terms with local authorities actually supporting it. And I think once they see a scheme that works well or has been successful, then there is more appetite to do it again. And I think what we have seen with community-led housing is that there is a lot of risk attached to it. And I think that needs to be accepted, that some schemes won't deliver. Some schemes will reach a point where they're not able to, start on site. And that's okay, because this is a fledgling sector. We're just starting out. The new ways of delivering are being explored. So it's really important to have that idea or have that knowledge at the onset that, we're doing this to support the community. We're doing this to see how this will support the supply of homes. But seeing schemes that work well and do work well will help to build that support in making sure that they are seen through right to the end.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a question now on just clarification on what co-housing is and what it's not. Maybe this is quite an easy one to end on. Jim Roach asks, can co-housing have a mix of social, affordable, private and owner rental tenure? Do such models exist? Michael, maybe you
I would jump into that right away. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's quite a good one. And my answer is quite simply yes, and I would really encourage that. If I think about co-housing, what it can be, what it should be, then I think about options and I think about diversity. We're talking about urban populations, diversified populations with diverse ways of living. And so I think absolutely we need to be considering models, and in fact we do have them. I could give a number of examples from Berlin and other cities where you have people renting, people owning small units, big units, cluster apartments right next to standard family apartments. So yeah, I think we need to be exploring mixed, not just mixed ownership, but mixed sorts of apartment typologies.
I definitely think myself, our co-housing plans in Cloughjordan Eco-Village, so we're looking at a pocket neighbourhood within ecological neighbourhood, is to have that mixed. I think it brings in what you mentioned, Ali, at the start, that reciprocity, that strong social capital. If we're all of one sort of type or one age, then we don't have that diversity and that richness and that resilience that comes from that diversity of people, but also diversity of tenure. So I think we'll be exploring that more over the next few days. We have come to the coffee break. We're clawing back some time there. I know that this probably wasn't as deep as some of us needed, and maybe the approach where you didn't get to ask yourself is a little one way, but our apology for that, but we're just working with what we're doing, and I think you'll agree with me that this morning's speakers have really set the tone, a bit of context, and bring an international perspective to what we're doing here in Ireland. So I'd like to thank Michael, Timothy, and Jacqueline, and of course Ali Grehan.